Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. So I would like to welcome you all, and special Dr. Gavriilidou. Today, it's a big honor for us to have you here and be our speaker. And I'm really happy that I see parents that they are coming, because as I said before, we are a team in this. Our language, our kids, we need to work together for the best, for the success. So before Kyria Gavriilidou starts, I wanted to share some information about her. So Dr. Gavriilidou is a professor of linguistics at Democritus University of Thrace and visiting professor at the University of Chicago. She has served as Vice Provost for Academic Affairs and Student Affairs, Chair of Department of Greek Philology, and Dean of the School of Classical and Humanities Studies at the University of Chicago. Additionally, she's the director of the Laboratory of Linguistics in Morphosy, as well as two postgrad programs, one of which is special education. Dr. Gavriilidou would say more, but today we want to listen to you today. So thank you so much.
Okay, I thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here today. And I would like to thank, of course, St. Nectario School, Greek School, for the invitation to me to deliver this speech. I would like also to ask you to excuse my English, because my first language is Greek and my second is French. So English is my third language. So please excuse my pronunciation. Okay, yeah, Maria said a few words about me. I'm professor of linguistics. I studied in Paris. I did my PhD there. And today, actually, we'll dive deep into the world of heritage languages and their speakers, exploring their sociolinguistic profiles and educational needs. And if time permits, and it will permit, we will dive into what parents should do with their children for helping them maintain Greek. Actually, that's our main purpose today. So we'll tackle three big questions. First of all, is a heritage language different than a native language, and how do they compare? This is very important to understand what we have to do. Our children are heritage speakers. Then we'll talk exactly about these creatures known as heritage speakers, and what are their educational needs. And because I know that a lot of you would like to hear that, the third question I will try to answer is, what should parents do with their kids to ensure heritage language maintenance? But before starting, let me ask you a question. I asked that question last time too. So, what is the official language in the United States? So I would like parents to raise their hands or open their microphones and answer to this question. Which one is the official language in the United States?
There is no official language.
Exactly, Margaret. Very, very correct. We don't, here in the United States, there is no official language. So that's a very good point, and this we have to keep it in mind. Now, this is the number of people living in the globe, around the globe. How many of these do you think are bilingual? Can you guess? Can you give me a number? A percentage, actually? Come on. Take a guess. Maria, Vicky, Margaret, Mircini, would you like to try to guess how many of these?
75%. I believe that most US people are not bilingual, but everyone is.
Exactly. It's François Grosjean did a research, and he found that the number of bilinguals is around 50 to 70%, with the median in 60% of humans who are bilingual or multilingual. And what about the United States? Let's see now. What percentage of the population you think speak a language other than English? And I can give you here 4 different guesses. Which one will you take? 0 to 25, 26 to 50, 51 to 75, or 76 to 100?
I think if we include Spanish, I would say 51 to 75. If you don't, I would say 0 to 25.
I'd say less than 25%.
Your first guess is closer, exactly. So people, according to the US Census, the last US Census, people who speak a language other than English is 21.56. Even Spanish people, this percentage is also it also includes Spanish-speaking people. Now, here we can see some non-English languages in the United States. Okay, of course, Spanish is the majority. And the problem is that 80% of people are monolingual in English here in the United States. So people here are not as exposed to my multilingualism, like children code switching, etc., as in the rest of the world. In Europe, for instance, bilingualism is the rule. It's the general situation. Okay, now, after this brief introduction, let me pass to the first part of my presentation, which is what is a heritage language and if it's different than a foreign language and then how. So, now what is a heritage language? A heritage language is a language other than the dominant one, immigrant, indigenous, or colonial, learned by its speakers at home with children, and very difficult to be fully developed because of insufficient input from the social environment. In some cases, I would say it's like the VIP language, not the mainstream one. Heritage language speakers are immigrant, indigenous, or colonial tongues learned at home by their speakers as children. And picture this. It's like trying to grow a bonsai tree in a desert because there's just not enough linguistic rain. It's the struggle of trying to nurture a language with a social environment that's drier than Sahara. I mean that we don't have too much exposure to the heritage language, and that happens for Greek too. So now, heritage languages are also referred to as ethnic minority languages, community languages, or home languages, and this depends on the perspective we adopt. Now, let's turn to what is a native language. And a native, it's actually the language that the person acquires in early childhood because it is spoken in the family, or it is the language of the region where the child lives. It is supported by the society. It's not what happens with a heritage language. We have support of the society in this case, and it is spoken everywhere. For instance, Greek for Greeks living in Greece, or English for children born in the United States. I am a native speaker of Greek, actually, okay? And I assume that the majority of the audience today has English as their dominant language. If not, just write it in the chat. And now, what about a foreign language? What is a foreign language then? It's a language that is not widely spoken or used by the people of a community, society, or nation. And people pick them up for functional reasons. For instance, trading, studying abroad, or becoming the next Indiana Jones of world travels. A good example of a foreign language is me, who born and living in Greece, have learned English as a foreign language. Now, foreign language will never reach the level of the native language. My English, for instance, will never be as my Greek. And we can see they may be parallel in paths, but foreign languages will never arrive the level of the native languages in a typical, actually monolingual situation. When a child... okay, let me mute that. Maria, did you do it? Did you mute everyone? Okay. So, in a typical monolingual situation, when the child is learning the majority language at home, in school, and later learns a foreign language, the first language is the stronger, the dominant or primary language, while the foreign language is the secondary language used less frequently. When we compare native languages with heritage languages, let's see what happens. Okay. An immigrant child may grow in a household where, for instance, mainly Greek is spoken. Over the years, depending on the amount of contact with Greek, that person may become much more English dominant than Greek dominant. And also, let me take that here, there is a shift in the functional dimension of the languages as a child grows up, with the heritage language eventually becoming secondary language use. This functional shift in turn affects the linguistic competence and fluency in the heritage language, which ends up resembling a foreign language, or in some cases, it is completely lost, especially for second or mainly third generation immigrants. So, this comparison actually illustrates that the heritage language is perceived as the more vulnerable language. Therefore, we must shield it and nurture it as if it were a delicate plant in the linguistic garden, like this basil plant in the picture I have here. Neglecting it poses the risk of having a linguistic bonsai instead of a towering oak. And as we wrap up this initial part of my presentation, let's affirm the necessity of providing our heritage languages, Greek in our case, with the linguistic nourishment they genuinely reserve for not getting dried and then dead. Now, let's move to the second part of my presentation, and let's talk a little bit more about heritage speakers and their educational needs. Who are heritage speakers? First introduced in Canada in the 70s, the term of heritage speakers are typically the offspring of immigrants or the indigenous people, for instance, children of Native Americans. They are raised in homes where English isn't the only linguistic rock star in town. They speak or merely understand the heritage language, and they are to some degree bilingual in English and the heritage language. It's a bit like having a bilingual superpower, but with extra cultural flair, because they have an ethnic and cultural connection to their linguistic roots. And as I often say to my students, heritage speakers have a direct hotline to their cultural heritage through language. No language, no connection with a culture. So this we have to keep it in mind. And that is why heritage language is so important. Also, there is a great variation among these heritage speakers, and let's see why. Why do some speak their heritage language like they were born with a dictionary in hand, while others navigate the linguistic landscape like it's a treasure map written in a code even within the same generation? To answer that question, it's not easy. It's like trying to solve a linguistic Rubik's Cube. And indeed, their proficiency, heritage speakers' proficiency, depends on a lot of parameters, like, for instance, how much of the heritage language they speak at home, what kind of input they have, which are the linguistic practices at home or with peers. Do they speak English with their brothers or peers, or Greek, or with friends? Also affective factors like do they like Greek? Do they value Greek? Do they think it's a part of their identities or not? And of course, it also depends on the motivation to learn Greek, access to schooling, how many years they go to schooling, what practices they follow at school, etc., etc. All these these factors affect the proficiency in the heritage language. Now, maybe we can skip this presentation, I'm sorry. And how can one become a heritage speaker? It's either through immigration, it's the case of Greek heritage speakers, either because of the political situation. For instance, imagine Spain during Franco, where people speaking Catalan weren't allowed to speak their language, okay? Either linguistic policies, and finally adoption, because imagine the case of children born, for instance, in Vietnam. A lot of children were adopted here in the United States from Vietnam, and they used to speak Vietnamese, but now they speak English, and Vietnamese is their heritage language. These are the different cases through which someone can become a heritage speaker. Now, what's more important? The characteristics of them. Typically, second-generation heritage speakers grow up acquiring the language of their parents' country of origin at home until they start attending school, at which time they begin to acquire the language of the host country, which in our case is English. So gradually they become dominant and more fluent in the majority language, limiting the use of the heritage language to the interaction with family and friends from the same sociolinguistic background. But why this happens? There are a lot of reasons. First and foremost, until very recently, linguistic policies in the United States favored monolingualism. Actually, immigrants in the 60s and the 70s were compelled to learn English and adapt, often at the expense of their heritage language. That was the compromise they had to pay for pursuing the American dream. Actually, yeah. So schooling also and peers also exert pressure on heritage language. Additionally, heritage speakers are sometimes afraid of the stigma of speaking another language than English, and some of them might fear also, these raised eyebrows and puzzled stares. What language do you speak here? So sometimes they are really afraid of that, and they prefer to use English instead. Also, let's not overlook, and that's very important, the perilous path of misinformation. Incorrect guidance, whether from teachers and sometimes from health providers, such as pediatricians, can lead parents astray, discouraging them from nurturing the heritage language. I have heard a lot of times pediatricians say you should not be speaking to your heritage language to your kids, or you should speak English only to your child at home to practice. And this is a misconception, and we'll see in a while why so. And also, we have some other challenges. Consider, for instance, the challenge of no formal schooling in the heritage language or insufficient time dedicated to it within the educational framework. Let's see what happens in Saturday schools. In Saturday schools, children typically have 2 to 3 hours per week, and in a regular daily school, they have approximately 1 hour spread across 4 days each week. However, this time is deemed insufficient for comprehensive language development, and this may hinder the development and proficiency of the heritage language. Now, do you also know this famous yaya effect? In the old days, families used to come to the United States, bringing along the yayades, grandmothers, to look after the children while the parents worked. Actually, on the one hand, they had the luggage, and on the other, they had the yayades. And the yayades did an excellent work because they used to say all these fairy tales to children and rhymes and nice songs, providing a pure, immersive experience. It was like having a linguistic oasis in the middle of a desert. But nowadays, yayades neither have the time nor speak Greek very well. So we no longer have this beneficial yaya effect. And sometimes, even if yayades know English, they prefer to speak to their grandchildren in English and not in Greek. Why? Because when I ask them, they say, yeah, the children don't understand us when we speak them in Greek. Of course, they won't understand as long as you don't speak to them in Greek, but if you start speaking to them, they will start having this experience. So, especially yayades, it is very important to use Greek at home and in any situation. Well, let's add to that due to mixed marriages, time constraints, or low proficiency of the parents, it's sometimes hard to speak Greek at the house. But I would like to say here that even if you don't speak very well Greek, it's good enough to speak Greek. It's not a problem to do some mistakes. The problem is not using Greek. Okay, so keep that in mind. Continue to speak Greek, even if you do some mistakes. And of course, let's not forget the ever-present fear of parents regarding the effects of bilingualism. A lot of parents ask themselves, will my child learn English if I speak to them in Greek? Or will accent in their speech? Is that good? And what about code switching? Is that beneficial or harmful if my child says, και έρχεται ο bad wolf and it's the yaya? Okay, that's code switching. We'll see what happens to code switching. And of course, that's very good. I know that parents are very much concerned that speaking a heritage language will make their children not learn English well enough or fast enough. But actually, we don't have any evidence about that. We have maybe to keep in mind that we should use our heritage language. Okay, sometimes parents are also afraid that their children will be confused. Look at this nice baby here in this picture. But no need to worry about bilingualism. Actually, our brains are wired to be bilingual. Recent research has shown that, sure, bilingual children might take their sweet time breaking into the world of speech, so they speak a little bit later, but guess what? They have better metalinguistic awareness. They read and write earlier than their monolingual peers. They outperform monolingual children in several tests, like the ones you can see in the slide. And if that's not enough, they've got also a backstage pass to the anti-dementia club. Yes, you've heard it right. Bilingualism is like a linguistic shield protecting against the villainous attacks of cognitive decline. The onset of dementia is delayed by an average of 10 years to bilingual minds, and that's very important. So talking about the test, do you know what's this test with the letters red, green, blue, yellow, etc.? Children have to read, to say the color of the words, not the color that it is written. So in this square here, they should say green, yellow, white, pink, orange. Okay, and when bilinguals do that, they do it faster than monolingual children. And the same in the other, test where they have to arrange, to classify schemata according to the color and to the shape. Now, I talked before about code switching. Does anyone know what is code switching? Can you give me an example? When we mix languages, this is called code switching, and it follows natural linguistic patterns. It requires actually strong levels of syntax in both languages. It is not a result of confusion, code switching. It's a systematic use of language. And if our children do that, we must be very proud of them because they master two different linguistic systems. Actually, code switching may also be a marker of identity. Some children use it to show that they have a dual identity, a Greek-American identity, not only American identity. So this is very important. Sometimes we think that bilinguals are two monolinguals joined at the neck, but this is not the case. What happens with bilinguals, it's this case. It's as if we have two different plants, and they have the roots underneath in the ground, which get together and they make the plants stronger. So that means that if you want your children to learn English, put them in Greek or put them in another language, because a second language may create more flexible minds who will facilitate language learning. Actually, yeah, it's a gift we can give to them, and we can give to them this gift when they are very young. This also we have to keep it in mind. This is what happens when a child learns a language earlier. We have more neurons connecting, and this helps language learning. It's easier to learn a language before the age of 8. But what happens here in the United States? Actually, we neglect or actively erase heritage languages from children from the early age until the age of 14. And when they turn 14, we allow some of them to study a foreign language. So they can study a foreign language at school at the age of 14. But then it's too late. And if parents had worked with the heritage languages before and had tried to maintain them, then we would have more bilinguals in the United States than we actually have. Okay, we can skip that. Now, let's take a linguistic journey through the generations in the pattern of intergenerational language shift. Let's see how we lose the language through the generations. And you can see in this picture, the immigrant. Can you see my mouse? This is the immigrant, the lady is here at the right. This is her daughter, which is the first generation. And this is the granddaughter, which is the second generation. And what happens here is what we have is that we have the first generation immigrants flexing, their linguistic muscles because they speak very well Greek. They know it is their native language, but they are grappling with non-native proficiency in the majority language. So this first generation doesn't speak English very well. That's actually my case, okay? I speak very well Greek, but not English very well. Also, the second generation are the children of the immigrants born on the linguistic battleground of the United States, and English is their dominant language, with proficiency in the heritage language ranging from low to high. It depends. And third generation, on the other hand, might range from low proficiency in the heritage language to monolingual maestros in the majority language in English. So this means that third generation may not have Greek at all. And unfortunately, and that's very sad, new data shows that the loss may happen within one generation. That's really, I find this tragic. This would mean that this lady here, let's go back. This means that this lady here wouldn't understand her daughter. Okay, now sometimes she can communicate with her granddaughter, but her daughter, this would be very tough. Imagine this situation. Imagine a world where a mother can't understand her daughter due to a linguistic canyon forming within. It's like, I would say, a linguistic soap opera. And we need some serious plot twists to keep the communication lines open. And that leads me to another question I asked at the beginning. Sorry, let me move here, of my presentation, which is what type of education in heritage language would keep the communication lines open. So what we need is actually modern educational materials like the ones I will show you in a while, teachers' professional development to use these new materials and methods, attractive teaching methods, otherwise kids will hate Saturday school. There is a very funny video in YouTube where there is a child, a Greek child, crying and telling, "Mom, I don't want to go to Saturday school or to Greek school." Also, Greek school and community task-based learning is needed because learning within school is not enough. So we have to take classrooms outside the school as well. And schools have to create opportunities for Greek heritage language learners to use Greek beyond the classroom and to interact with the members of their community, the family, in authentic situations, for instance, during the organization of a cultural event or the participation in a traditional ceremony, marriages, etc., where parents and teachers need to offer heritage learners meaningful opportunities to use their Greek skills outside the classroom, acquiring new learning and practice in real-life community contexts, while strengthening their connection with the Greek community. Also, the adoption of such practice makes the use of language seem natural, welcomed, and expected if we put learning also outside the class. Finally, we need trained teachers from the community, because when we have teachers coming from Greece, sometimes they don't know the situation here. And assuming that children here have the same linguistic level and needs as those back in Greece. And of course, we also need immersion from pre-K, and a reminder not to stop at the ripe age of 12. We need more Greek than that. So I told you before, I spoke to you before about some creative, teaching materials. The curriculum for teaching Greek as a heritage language is a material like that. Actually, it's a curriculum where learning takes place through games. It's game-based learning. It is also task-based learning, where children learn things while they do things. It's also community-based, because it takes the opportunity to send children out to the community, do things, and learn by doing. And of course, it uses very much strategy-based learning, which means that this curriculum tries to make children think strategically when they learn Greek. Okay. And also, this is very important, learning Greek, as we said before with Maria Kyriakadonaki, it's a group. It's a thing we can do in group, actually. And that's what we did here in Chicago. Something big and amazing happened here in Chicago the last 2 years regarding Greek education. Why? Because we had a dynamic collaboration which has emerged between two esteemed institutions, the Democratic University of Phrase on the one hand, and the Center for Hellenic Studies of the University of Chicago on the other, which acts as a cornerstone for the local community. And this collaborative effort, involving also the Consulate General of Greece in Chicago and the Greek Education Office of the Metropolis of Chicago, along with both parochial and non-parochial schools, has orchestrated a comprehensive evidence-based approach deeply rooted in the educative needs of the community. And this initiative spans across multiple levels and is designed to engage the entire community, including adult learners, young learners, educators, parents, and the broader community. We do things together, all together. And the orchestrated actions are carefully crafted to complement each other, creating a synergistic effect that goes beyond the sum of its parts. For instance, that's why I say that Chicago has now become a shining example of other states in the United States to emulate, not only in the field of Greek education, but also as a model for promoting heritage languages nationwide. For instance, we had teacher professional development, we had model teaching, we had this activity which we call Let's Play Books, which is an immersive reading animation activity to acquaint children with Greek children's literature. We have also the Refresh Your Greek, which addresses the needs of adults. And actually, we offer lessons to adults to refresh their Greek. This is also important. And we have some study abroad programs like the Return to Your Roots Study Abroad Summer Camp. Okay, so you see what we need if we want to make Greek thrive. And now, the last part. Okay, so we'll have that. In the last part of my presentation, give me a second. Okay, I will address what parents should do to assist their children in acquiring the heritage language. So, what parents should do? First of all, enroll their children in Greek schools. Okay, I understand it takes time, it takes money, but it's crucial. However, the Greek school, while a beacon of hope, it's not enough. We also need community practice, as I told you before. Community practice is, let's say, the secret sauce, and so is framing Greek positively. When our children ask us why to learn Greek, what do you answer? What do you say to them? I would really like to hear you. I'm sure that your children ask you, yes, Mama, I don't want to go to school. Why I have to learn Greek? And what do you answer to them in that case?
I say to them that their studies in English will be a lot easier because half of the words are Greek.
Yeah, that's true. It's more than 70% of the vocabulary in English, which is Greek, especially in disciplines like biology, physics, medicine, of course. Yeah, so that's a very good reason. What else?
We tell our daughter as well that it's την γλώσσα μας, so we're gonna
Okay,
learn τη
perfect.
δικιά μας
Yeah.
γλώσσα, όπως και οι άλλοι τη δικιά τους.
Yeah.
And that piggyback on that comment that if she learned the Greek, that it'll help her in her studies and mathematics and everything will come easy once she can put the pieces of the puzzle together, that the language will help her learn.
Yeah, of course. And it's also the language to use when we speak with grandparents, with cousins, maybe back in Greece or even here sometimes. So we also have to keep that in mind. And of course, you know what is Ελληνομάθεια? Hmm? Do you know and do you participate in the exams of Ελληνομάθεια?
Yes, church. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Can you share, because maybe we have some parents that don't know that?
Yes, from what I understand, my kids are 13 and they have been going to Greek school. And my daughter this year is giving level 1 of Ελληνομάθεια. There are certain levels.
Καλή
And
επιτυχία.
ο Θεός να βάλει το χέρι του. And once you pass, my niece just passed the last level, and that means that you're fluent in Greek. And from what I understand, very limited, is that you can then study in Greece without the language barrier.
One thing, you can study in Greece without the language barrier, but also here you may have this seal of biliteracy, which is very, a lot of employers ask for that. So once you get the Ελληνομάθεια, you can apply to its state. There are different seals of biliteracy. You can see here the Illinois or the Massachusetts state, etc., seal of biliteracy, and you can apply to get this seal, and you can put it in your CV, and this is very welcomed by, employers. But also, even if you go to college, there are a lot of universities like the University of Chicago, but also other universities as well, who offer minors in Greek, so they can combine another major they want to make and also a minor in Greek. And this is very important for them. They can easily have that. So there are some practical reasons, but also there is the reason that Greek is the language of our culture, and we have to connect with them, and we can't connect with Greek culture without Greek language. Now, going back to good practice we can use, of course, it's very good to do a 10 minutes a day heritage language routine. For instance, speak during 10 minutes, to your children in Greek. This will help them very much, trying to hear Greek and then wanting to use it. And of course, travels in heritage country are very welcomed and they help very much. We have data, research data that show that children who travel often in Greece or in other heritage countries, they have the desire to learn to speak. I knew a child who wanted to learn Greek because they wanted to go to the canteen στην παραλία και να πάρει παγωτό alone, okay? That was really amazing because he had a motive, a motivation to learn Greek for doing something alone in Greek. And of course, what is also very important is to read Greek books or comics or watch Greek movies and videos in Greek. It's really important for them in order to have this immersion to Greek language. Now, let's do a challenge. I want you now to open your cameras. Can you open the cameras? I want to see your faces. Okay, I want to see your fingers like that. Okay. Vicky Xanthopoulou, you have to take some pictures now, okay? Because I can't. And now, I will tell you things and you will put your finger down if you do that thing. So, let me see that. Tina, 2 hands, Tina. Are you smoking? What are you doing there? You keep the phone, okay. 5 fingers. Then, Andrea, Maria, Vasily, please open your cameras. And let's start. Put a finger down if you wake your children every day saying Kalimera. Put your finger down if you kiss them and say Kalinita at bedtime. Put your finger down if you say Kali όρεξη before eating. Put your finger down if you say Πλύνε τα χέρια σου when they are back from school. Put your finger down if you watch Greek movies or animations with them. Put your finger down if you read them Greek books. If you don't do it, don't put your finger down, of course. Put your finger down if you kiss them and, sorry, we did that. If you speak at least 10 minutes per day Greek to your children. Put your finger down if your child goes to Greek school. And finally, put your finger down if you make them participate in Greek community events. Let me see the fingers. Okay, that's good. That's well enough. I'm very glad about that. Perfect. So you do a lot of things with your children and continue doing that and even more. They have to practice and we have to insist with Greek language. Now, I think that, yeah, a closing question. Let me share again my presentation to this closing question. So yesterday I was in a congress and someone told me, well, if the community doesn't want to maintain their heritage language, you can't do anything. So I'm asking you, do you want to maintain your heritage Greek? And I'm seeking for a clear answer. And with that, I would like to thank you very much. And please have in mind that maintaining a heritage language is a linguistic journey of epic proportions, and the more exposure, the merrier. Thank you very, very much. And I'm open to questions and discussion. Yeah, go on, Lucine, yeah.
You mentioned a program with the university, Sithraki.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess this is where I'm going with this. We have the ability to go to Greece, you know, for a few weeks in the summer.
Yeah.
And go to Greek school, they participate. We don't speak to them in Greek as much as we should. But when they speak English and they don't try to blend in. So I was hoping to find a program where they can go in for at least 2 weeks just to kind of submerge themselves into the program.
Mm-hmm. There are some opportunities. The one I mentioned to you before is only for children living in the Midwestern states. because it is organized by the Consul General of Greece in Chicago in collaboration with us, Democratic University, and the University of Chicago. But I'm sure that there are some other initiatives as well to other states, and you should try to see if something like that happens. On the other hand, I think also the Archdiocese of the Orthodox Archdiocese of America does a similar program. So please go to the websites, search well, and I'm sure you'll find some possibilities like that for sending children to Greece. And of course, you know, there are all these summer camps in Greece, in various places, and we can send them there too.
Yeah, okay. I'll take a look at the website.
Yeah, take a look, yeah. This is the best way, this immersion. This is the best way to
Camps in
empower
Greece
them.
is the best, I think.
Sorry?
I think the Greek camps in Greece
Mhm.
are the best for kids from here to go there and spend the time and the language and everything that includes.